there's two things that I think are really important and key here, and this is something that I've been discussing for a number of years now in different ways, and I want to just kind of solidify this understanding. Basically, your body consists of a bunch of balloons and tubes, and there's no straight pipe anywhere, and if the elasticity of your tissue starts to harden, then what can happen is you can have a break in the balloons that make up the capsules of your joints, for example, or the balloons behind your lungs, your pleura. And if that breaks down, then essentially you can lose the negative pressure that allows you to breathe. So the actual structure of your joint capsule, the structure of your organs, these balloons, for example, has to be made out of certain substances. Fats, latex-like materials, vitamin C, sulfur, silicon compounds, and that's what really is going to give you that longevity. So one of the big ones that's been found is these long-chain omega-3s, which is DHA and EPA. So I take at least 3 of these every day. Some of you might go, hey, let's do fish oil instead. Some of you might go, let's do krill oil. But this long-chain omega-3 is different than the medium-chain omega-3 ALA. So there's 3 omega-3s. That's easy to understand. There's 3 essential omega-3s. You don't need to worry about omega-6 because omega-6 is automatic. You have avocados, you eat almonds, you have olive oil, you get your omega-6. That's easy. That's not a worry. But the thing to think about is like, okay, I got to focus on omega-3 because we don't automatically get that. The ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 in the conventional diet and even in some of these advanced diets is actually quite off. It can be 1 to 20, for example. Dr. Dave was getting into that, where the ratio is off. So I'm always thinking omega-3, especially long chain, to balance that out because, again, the omega-6 is easy. I'm getting all of that from chia seed. I'm getting that from whatever other pumpkin seed, whatever the kind of nuts and seeds that I'm eating. The omega-3 that's in hemp seed, the omega-3 that's in flaxseed, the omega-3 that's in evening primrose oil is ALA. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory oil. It's a great oil. It's a necessary omega-3, but it isn't really particular for joint inflammation. It isn't really particular for the structure of the joint. It isn't really particular for cognition. It isn't particular for what we're going to get into tomorrow, which is if you're a breastfeeding mom, you got to have DHA in your body, gets in your breast milk oils, and that gets in your baby and actually develops the brain and nervous system of the baby. And this is something that's been figured out over the years. So where we were 30 years ago in vegan nutrition has absolutely nothing to do with where we are now or in any nutrition. Nothing to do with it because of the innovations of the internet. The internet has just made these things that were a mystery very clear. Once communication, remember this phrase? Once the communication becomes instantaneous, technology becomes infinite. So all of a sudden we can cross-reference the data and go, oh, this makes sense, this doesn't. We can start looking at it and going, what do we have to do? One of the things that we found out with vegetarianism is that this DHA, EPA, ALA, 3 omega-3s are essential. And they're very important long term. You can get away without them, but one day you'll pay the price. It'll be a neurological price, could be an inflammatory price, could be a joint problem. And once the joint problems start in, it's much more difficult to deal with it later than in advance. It's much better to be preventative of these things. So one of the tools that I carry is this. Obviously, this is the David Wolf Omega-3 algae oil. This is algae oil. This is that product I was telling you has 1 milligram of astaxanthin in every capsule. And then if you have 2 a day, which is what I recommend, then you get your 2 milligrams of astaxanthin. And if somebody gets up here and is on the game show panel to win the rebounder, we might ask a question about that. Maybe. So you're going to have to start going, oh, wait, huh? Uh-oh. Start thinking about that now. Astaxanthin, what's that? Another thing that's a really powerful product in this regard, and this is something that comes up quite a bit, is that the joint integrity has to have that sealant. That capsule has to be sealed off. If the joint integrity is damaged, if there's a break in the seal, if there's been an operation, a surgery, then what has to happen is your tissue has to be closed back up. You have to actually seal that bladder back up, the capsule back up, and then your body has to pump out and get that negative pressure out, right? Once you open up the joint, you're actually going to have to, your body's going to have to seal it off, try to drive off all the scar tissue, and then pump out the positive pressure of the atmosphere. This is the whole thing about our joints. Our joints are actually not what we think they are. there's a negative pressure. I was talking with Dr. Lyons. I think I saw you over there. Wait, there he is right there. So he was noticed over the years when people had joint problems that if he put a needle into the joint, if the joint was healthy, the needle gets sucked into the joint because it's negative pressure. That's one of the reasons why your joints have levitational qualities. When it's bone on bone, that means there's some kind of problem. And as Dr. Lyons told me, he found out that the needle gets pushed out. Suddenly, the negative pressure is a positive pressure. There's some kind of an inflammation inside the joint that pushes the needle out. And that's when we get onto bone on bone. That's when you get on cartilage. That's when the trouble begins. You never actually want those two things, those surfaces even touching each other. It's like a tree. The way water is levitated into a tree, negative 15 atmospheres has to occur under the influence of bark. And you start looking at bark of a tree, and it's got very interesting things that it's doing. It's shielding from light. It's shielding from oxygen. It's shielding from heat. And it has all these tubules in it in a certain way, so the water actually just falls up under a negative pressure. If you take an axe and you go, not anymore, and you start chopping down the tree like George Washington, you're going to screw up that negative pressure. You're going to allow the atmospheric pressure, and it'll be a positive pressure. It'll be like an atmospheric pressure, and the tree will go, well, we can't get the liquid up the tree anymore. It's not going to happen. In a redwood tree, it can reach minus 15 atmospheres up there in the liquid. The liquid can actually have a negative atmospheric pressure. Gases can't, but a liquid can. And so that liquid that's in that joint, that DHA, that omega-3, can actually help your body to create a negative pressure, seal the joint off so that your joint can repair itself. I'd recommend that strategy long before getting a surgery. One day we'll figure out that if you're going to open up a joint under surgery, you have to actually have a negative pressure environment around that joint, and you have to have no oxygen in that environment, or you're going to have oxidation of that very delicate tissue. One day that will be figured out. If you're 12 years old and you have an operation on your joint, you might recover on it. If you're 62, probably not. That's just being totally honest. You probably won't recover from it. And so this is something that's being discovered, is that you should probably look into not only the right nutrition for that joint capsule, for example, DHA, long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, and certain compounds that influence healthy joint development, for example, sulfur, MSM, DMSO, sulfur-bearing amino acid foods. For example, garlic has kind of a sulfury smell to it. Eggs have a sulfury smell to it. Spirulina has a sulfury smell to it. That's a sulfur-bearing protein that creates good, flexible joint material and seals in that capsule so there's no gap. Because if there's an infectious organism that goes, oh, that's a weak joint capsule, there's no immune system inside that joint. So every infection goes, we want in. Arthritis. We want into that joint because there's no immune system in there. And if I can get in there, then I'm good. I'm shielded. I'm protected from being taken over by the immune system.